All right, here I think is the most fun part of all this. I'm a big fan of things, as you can see, that starts with storytelling, but with substance. To me, an investor pitch has both excellent stories, but it has the substance of the numbers that proves why the story is a good idea to the investor. So I've provided for you, as you should be able to find, this PDF that is a 19-page printable example of a financial model. It then is going to be opened right now by me in Excel so I can walk you through how it's built quickly, and then we are going to spend several periods building it together. Do you mind if I do? No, go ahead. Thanks for asking. So let's look first at the print preview. So when I go to the print preview and I look at this entire workbook, it should be the exact 19-page map overlay of the PDF that I provided, so that what I gave to you is just a PDF version of what I've built. If we take a look within the workbook, then there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different tabs underneath it. The 6 different tabs start with a cover sheet or an overview, where in this I should be able to look and say, you're pitching me on this property in this city in this country that is this size, that will cost this much to buy, and will provide this type of return. So that if I didn't look any further, I could look and go, oh, they're looking at a small residential building in Rotterdam that's going to cost 400,000 euro and give me a 9% return. Within your overview, then, come a series of assumptions that apply then to the rest of these 4 statements: the rent roll, the sources and uses, the cash flow projections, and the debt detail. For example, you would start with something like, how will the property generate income? Well, its revenues come from 2 different sources in my model. The base rent provides the major source of the cash flow. That's tenants paying for their leases in the property. If I take a look at where that number comes from, you see it's coming from equals cash flow projections C4. So if I go over to cash flow projections C4, I go, oh, look, the scheduled base rental revenue is indeed that 1.19 million number. But if you take a look up there, that number is actually coming from another place, which is the rent roll. It's on rent roll H30, where if I look at my rent roll, I see I have all these different suites or offices that are inside of my property. And, oops, that should be suite 107. We should have changed that. I'll fix it later. So this would represent all of the different individual rentable places within a building, like Suite 101 has almost 4,700 square feet. Roughly 8% of the building is allocated to the tenant who occupies it. They started renting it. Oops, I didn't fix these ones either. That should be 2031. They started occupying it in 2024, and their lease expires in 2031. Per square foot, they're paying $23.76, which means roughly their monthly rents are about $9,200. And so annually, this tenant is paying me $110,000. And when I put all of my tenants and all of my suites together, I eventually get to the sum of my rents, which is that 1.19 number that I then pulled into my cash flow projections and then presented back over in my overview so that if someone came to me and said, talk to me about the current status of this building right now and how is it occupied, who's in it, and how much are they paying you, I should have the ability to say something like, well, I can generate about $1.2 million in base rents right now based off the current rent roll. The rent roll is the statement that shows you all your different sources of rental income by suite and then by year. And as you can imagine, as somebody who maybe rents a flat of your own, when your lease comes due before your last year, your landlord may come to you and say, we're actually going to raise your rents a little bit. So on the rent roll, we have the ability to say, okay, in 2027, we are going to subject our clients, for example, who are paying $23.76 right now, to a 3% increase. So their rents will go from $23.76 up to $24.47, which will allow my rental revenue from them to increase from 1.10 up to 1.14, so that in the second year, my total rents move from 1.19 to 1.23. And I have the ability to build that into my model for every one of the required 10 years for which I will estimate the projections in the model. Then we see something like this. There's a teeny little space over here called vacant. Suite 204 is 756 square feet. It represents only about 1% of my building, and nobody is in there right now. But with the story you tell me, perhaps you are going to build an amenities center that has a gym and a bicycle parking storage area. And that will make the building more attractive so that by the time that 2027 comes around, you now, at the beginning of the year, get a brand new tenant who signs with you a 5-year lease, 31, and they're going to pay $20 per square foot. And now I generate a marginal $15,000 in new rents that I wouldn't have had I not made those capital improvements. Or you may look at the rent roll and see this lease was subject to expire at the end of 2026. Well, at the end of 2026, then, I need to convince that tenant to go ahead and sign a new lease with me. And so maybe I convince them to sign a new 3-year lease, but perhaps that requires me to give them a little discount on rent. Or maybe I can raise it up even higher. This, for you marketing people, is P times Q, price times quantity. This is where I draw all of my sources of revenues through my leases. It is price per square foot, P, times Q. How much square footage do you have? And then we add it up so that we can get to our annualized incomes. On my cover sheet, I'm presenting for you just the first one. Now, buildings may have other sources of revenues associated with them too. Like you may have a parking lot and you may require tenants to pay for parking. Or it may have a public parking lot attached to it where people who are coming to the city center can pay for the right to park. Or if you have a gym, maybe tenants have to pay for membership. We often have what we call reimbursements, meaning we will charge tenants to reimburse us to do things like pay the electrical bill. And that can be subject to the terms of the lease. So in total, I'm going to help you build out something that says this particular property in the first year then would provide for me roughly $1.2 million in total income, and that becomes my first major checkpoint. How much cash do I have to work with to begin with? And the cash that I have is primarily a function of all of my tenants paying their rents. I'm going to back out my numbers a little bit here just so that I can fix it. All right, so there. Okay, so that's where you start. Because if I walk away from this class and I'm you, I'm like, how do you really invest in a property? Like, what's this really all about? You need tenants to pay rent. That's where your cash flows in come from. Where do your cash flows out go to? Now, this is where the American market is a little bit different than the Dutch market in that we have three basic expenses that we pay. In the US, because I think in the Dutch, when you transfer property, don't you pay property taxes in advance on close, and then you don't pay annually? We have to pay every year in the United States. So we pass through that cost where we make them pay us a reimbursement so we can pay their tax every year. So we call that real estate taxes on a per square foot basis. We have to pay those. Those come out of their rents. Second thing we have to pay what we call CAM. It's an acronym, Common Area Maintenance. That's for paying things like electricity in the hallways, or cleaning services for the bathrooms, or snow removal from the sidewalks, or landscaping costs for our green spaces. It's all of the expenses that we pay so that they commonly can have a nice building. That's the second big thing we pay. And in my experience in real estate, it's one of the most variable ones in weather-dependent markets. For example, Chicago in the last 2 years has been the grand beneficiary of climate change in that we've had near zero snow for the last 2 years. We normally allocate something like $1 per square foot just for snow removal. When you don't have to pay for snow removal, that's just money I get to keep then. But we allocate for that common area maintenance. Then the third thing, and I think this is where your firm maybe slides in, we also then charge a management fee. And that management fee then gets paid possibly to a third party. I might hire you to come and do the management of my building. And by management, oftentimes that means everything from whether you're doing janitorial and maintenance, or whether you're doing lease administration, or whether you're doing customer support, or whether you're doing IT and payroll. It's all of the other operating costs that a business has. So we may have to hire a company that comes in and maintains all of our IT infrastructure on site. So you make your money from rents. You got to pay tax. You got to pay for the common areas, and you got to pay for the building's management. Those are the things I walk away with and saying, that's how you operate a building. But the big number we focus on is what we call NOI, net operating income. It's the money that's left over after you collect the rents and pay the operating expenses. Because the NOI goes to pay three new things of its own. The NOI then, first, has to pay for debt. The traditional financing model that we use in U.S. corporate commercial real estate is 75% of a building's price comes from the banks, and 25% comes from ROD and other investors. So after you pay to operate the building, the first line below NOI is debt service. And so debt service means we got to go ahead and borrow, in this case, for a building that costs $6 million, we have to take into account there are all kinds of other expenses at closing. We got to pay the broker's expenses. We may have to pay abatements for free rents. We have to pay legal fees. We may have to pay a proration from property tax. We may have to put money in reserve for capital expenditures. So the purchase price is only a part of the total acquisition cost. Usually the total acquisition cost is another 5 to 7% of a building's purchase price. But of the 6.8 million we need, 4.5 million is going to come from secured financing, debt on the building. And so we can do something like off debt detail B6, we would find that 75% of our purchase price means we're going to take out a loan of $4.5 million. When I left Matt the other day, he's actually in Vegas at a conference for this right now. He was in his final discussions with the bank, who was telling him that at his 75%, he was going to have to pay an interest rate of, I think he was at 6.5% at that time. When I built this sample model a few years ago, is when interest rates were much lower. Now interest rates are much higher, but what this suggested as at a 4.2% interest rate means that after we've paid for the operations of the building, we had $505,000 left over. Roughly $300,000 next goes to the banks to pay for the debt service. After we paid for the banks, we then go and pay our investors, because the investors get, like the banks do, an interest rate of return. We call that the PREF, the preferred dividend payout is what it's called, the PREF, preferred dividend. So I heard you saying something like 8% earlier. In the US, depending on the geography, depending on the class of property, anywhere between 6 to 12% is what an investor is going to expect as an annual cash payout on their investment. And so if our investors bring $2.3 million to the table, and then because I'm going to expect you guys to pretend like you have some money to put in the deal too, because we call it skin in the game. If you're going to pitch to me an investment that's so good that you want my money, I want to know that when I win, you win, and if I lose, you lose. So I'm going to expect you to come to the table with some money too. And now I know you don't have any money, so you can make this part up and it can be more fictional. But in total, off of cash flows C22 over here, all of my investors are going to get an 8% dividend payout, which means while I had $505,000 to work with, oops, Alt WQ, sorry, I just shrunk that for a sec. I had $505,000 left over after making sure the building ran. Then I needed to pay another $300,000 to the bank. The next party I have to pay is my investors. And that's another $184,000. So here's that recap again. The 505 minus the 294 left me with like 211. Next, I need to put a little bit of money into a savings account in case the roof breaks, or in case the water pipes burst, or in case I need to do some other emergency capital repairs. I always kind of put money into a savings account. That then gives me what we call free cash flows, money that I am free to do with what I wish. And what I wish to do is first give the investors their dividend. And what I have in the end then is possibly extra money left over to do whatever I want with. What could I do? I could go and give the investors their money back. if I had enough. I could go and just put more into a capital reserve fund in case the ceiling falls in. Or I could accrue it for a new capital investment in an amenity center or in a parking lot. Or I could just hold on to it for a rainy day so that in the end, my calculation can say, look, investors, C44 divided by C35. My investors are bringing $2.3 million to the table. That's going to generate $202,000 worth of free money. Free cash flow is not free money, which is then an 8% return on your money. Because at the end of the day, who's king? Cash. So all I want to know, for every dollar I give you, how much dollars are you going to create back? This model then, this summary sheet, is based off of that rent roll, and then it's based off of our sources and uses. So for example, what do we use the money for? Well, we have to pay the current owner for the property. There's always attorney costs, or you have to hire an inspector to come and see whether or not there are environmental concerns, or whether or not there are foundation issues, or whether or not there are mechanical issues. Then there's always an acquisition fee, which is usually brokers. Then we usually like to put money aside just in the event that something happens. There's usually some type of governmental tax involved. And then the banks usually charge closing costs, so that in the end, a $6 million building, we need to come up with $6.8 million to buy it. Where are we going to get the money from? $4.5 million is going to come from the banks, because the banks are going to give us 75% of the purchase price, which then means we need to come up with another $2.3 million. Where is that coming from? This is where I need to find investors. So this is me. This is what you're looking for. You're going to come to me and you say, hey, Professor Al, we want you to come up with whatever your number is. And we are going to come up with another this much. And then our aunts and our uncles and our friends and our neighbors and the person down the street who just gave me €100,000 are all going to be part of the group of investors who are going to help you raise that total $6.8 million to buy the building. But when you ask me for that money, I'm going to then ask you, well, what do I get in return for it? B18 times C16 says you're going to give me a preferred dividend payout every year. And every year, I'm going to be entitled to $12,000. I shouldn't record this because they might hear it, but I don't care. They'll figure it out. In the IRL, in the real world, Matt Bauman, who you're going to hear from, when I saw him right before I left, was delivering a check for $68,000 to Rod Berthold, because Rod is an investor in Matt's properties, and that was his quarterly preferred dividend payout. He delivers that check to Rod 4 times a year, because Rod gets $12,000 from one building he's in, and $8,000 from another building he's in, and $22,000 from another building he's in, because Rod's one of Matt's main investors. So you need to tell me, here's what you're going to get, Kaminsky, if we go ahead and do a deal together where we can raise funds to purchase that building. Then we take the rent roll and we take all of those expenses, like real estate taxes and common area maintenance and the maintenance fee. And this is where we do the calculations for the heavy lifting that gets my NOI, the interest expense, all the way down to this excess cash flow number that I pulled in to this overview sheet. I'll show you how to do a debt amortization table. And some of you are looking at me right now like, holy crap, I wish I took a different module online. I said that what's important to me? You're here. Want to get you somewhere higher than where you were. Second thing I said is important. I want you to have a good experience. Third thing that I said is important. I want you to build some skills. I want you to build some Excel skills. I want you to work on your visual design skills. I don't have time to teach you that one in this class, but I am working with you on your storytelling skills. This is the most important page. Not all of you need to do the financial model piece for your team. I'm going to have us all learn how to do it in here so you all know how it works. But this is the most important piece. This to me is the script so that I can sit down and say, Rosita, I'm going to propose to you today that we are going to buy a Class A commercial property with 3,400 square meters for $3 million. The building's asking price is $3 million, but I think we can get it for $2.8 million. Here's how we're going to finance this thing. 75% of the money is going to come from the bank. 25% is going to come from a team of investors, of which we'd like to invite you to participate. My colleagues and I are going to bring a couple of $100,000 to the table, and we'd like to ask you to do the same. Now, the banks are going to be in on the deal with us, and the banks are going to charge us an interest rate of 6.5%, and that's going to cost us roughly $300,000 a year. But the rest of us equity investors, including you, are going to get a preferred dividend of 8%. And our commitments to each other are going to cost us roughly $202,000 a year. Now, the building right now is 80% occupied, which means it's 20% empty. But those leases right now produce for us about $1.2 million. Our goal is to get this thing 100% occupied so that we have even more cash flows in the future. But to do this, we're going to need to make some capital improvements. And those capital improvements then are going to cost us an additional amount of X. And here's what we're going to do with it. And this is where you guys get to have some fun, making some pitch proposals on, look at our brand new gym space. Look at our fancy espresso machine. Look at our new amenity center that we're going to build. But that costs money too. But after we've done all that, we'll have a fully stabilized building where in 2030 then those leases should be producing from 1.19 million up to 1.6 million with our improvements. That will then give us total operating costs in that year of 1.2 million, which will give us then NOI of 700,000. Can you see the building in the future? Because if you can, then we would like to ask you to invest a total of $150,000. We're going to put in $100,000 of our own, and we estimate just in year one a cash-on-cash return of 8.78%. Can we count on you to partner with us on this deal? So do you see how the numbers just helped me tell the story? But the story has more components than just the numbers. It has a visual component. So with 1 minute past our time together, I'm going to encourage you to spend time between today and tomorrow with your team thinking about what property do you want to take a look at so you can start building the visual image that goes with the story. I will post this little video that I just recorded to YouTube. I'll send you a link so you can watch it. Tomorrow when you get here, have your thing fully charged, have your Excel open, have your caffeine in your body, and let's get ready to model.